like that, and all the organisation, we think, goodness, it's got to have some watchmaker or designer behind it. Irreducible complexity of living things, we can, everything, some things like mousetrap, there's just no way you can reduce that anymore. It's efficient, it's super efficient. And we find that lots of things in the human body are just, you can't reduce it anymore. It just works perfectly as it is. And there's no way you can improve upon it. Religion, ultimately, we'll be arguing from the idea of it's a spiritual given. One man said, in every person is a God-shaped void. Who was that, right?
Sure.
In every person is a God-shaped void.
No.
When it holds everything you need for building a house, and when the explosion clears out of the way, you end up with a beautiful mansion. This happens by chance. Now that's what they are talking about. And we saying, to get someone like that, a designer, a maker, a builder, all involved. And as Hebrew writer says, every house has a builder. Now, both evolutionists and creationists believe evolution is an impossibility if the universe is only a few thousand years old. Because the evolutionist says we need billions of years in order for these things to develop. So if we were to agree with that, we would say, yeah, you need lots and lots of time. There's probably no statement we'll make on the topic of origins where we reach so much agreement from both sides. Setting aside the question of whether vast time is competent to propel evolution, we must query if vast time is indeed available. Hydrogen is a colourless, odourless gas, which if given enough time, turns into people. Yeah, it looks like an Einstein there, doesn't it? Theory of evolution. I don't think so.
Big feet anyway.
Yes. Well, it needs that to be able to hold himself in a position like that. So, do we have enough time? Biblical history gives us a fairly clear timeline. It's not accurate to 100% because Bishop Ussher said that the world only existed for 4,000 X or many years, but as BC obviously. I wouldn't do that. And I hear there are a number of websites, religious websites on the internet that actually say 6,000 years. Well, I wouldn't like to say, make a demarcation line just quite like that. Because if we talk about penny, it says dated 6,000 or 6002, then your whole credibility is thrown out the thing. I certainly wouldn't say 6,000 years, but then again I wouldn't say more than 10,000 or 50,000 years. I would, err on the side of not so long, but I wouldn't pin down a date, because I'm not that stupid. But having said that, their argument, they look at this as a genealogy, and the Bible says day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. If that are proper days, how do you fit in the millions of years that the evolutionists claim? And they've got a problem with that. Now, some people, even religious people, because they say, well, evolution's got so much going for it, it must be fairly right. So they say, well, what happens is between day 1 and day 2 are millions of years, and then between day 2 and day 3 there's millions of years. And so they're saying that when the Bible talks about a day, they're not talking about a real day, a 24-hour day. They're talking about an elongated day, because they say, God says a day with the Lord is 1,000 years. And they say, well, look at there you are. But obviously they're taking that out of context.
And 1,000 years is one day.
1,000 years is one day. See, so they're taking that out of context, but it's because they're trying to fit the time in.
How can they work? There was evening and there was morning. One day.
Well, that's right. They are
24 hours.
That's right. That's where they fall from.
That's where it falls.
So both progressive creationists and theistic evolutionists want to fit somehow, or want to marry somehow, the concept of evolution with the concept of religion. But the problem is, where do they fit it? And they have struggled to do that. The genealogy of Genesis chapter 5 and 11 cannot be used to calculate the exact date at which Adam was created. They cannot, however, be stretched back indefinitely. There's not all the people mentioned in genealogy. It doesn't mention everybody ever existed, or the mother-father relationship from the beginning of time. It doesn't do that. It doesn't work out that way. But at the same time, it doesn't turn around and say, there are millions of years between Adam and Seth, and millions of years between Seth. It just doesn't work that way either. So whether Adam was created 6,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, or whether it was created billions of years ago. There's a vast gap in there we just can't fit in. And as far as we're concerned, the millions of years just doesn't hold. So, a lot of people say, well, it's got to hold because the Earth looks old. And you look at any of these geological timescales, and you look at any of these, a lot of these modern programs dealing with the Earth and stuff like that, they'll show you the different stratas and say this strata is X amount of years old, this is X. Look at coal. We've been burning coal for years. We're almost out of it. Well, coal must have taken millions of years to get the trees and sort them all down into coal and stuff like that. We've got diamonds. You know, it must have taken years for diamonds to get to the state they're in today. So just by looking around ourselves and some of the physical evidence on Earth, the Earth must be millions of years old. It's got to be, because it's got huge age built into it. All right? Well, that's an interesting question. The reason we can associate Adam with the age of the Earth is because God told us. Why do you believe that Adam was only not millions of years old? Well, God said. God created him. Okay? In 6 days, he says, the Lord made heavens and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. And that's part of the just coming up to the commandments, where he says, God rested on the seventh day. And ever since, the Jews have kept the seventh day, because God rested on the seventh day. That means that the earth was created on day one, and Adam was created on day 6. Then the earth is only 5 days older than man. In addition, Jesus himself said, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. He says, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Okay? How old was Adam when God made him? You know, was he a 6-year-old? 10-year-old? 15-year-old? 25-year-old? We don't know.
Was diamonds made at the same time?
I'll come back to that. Adam looked his age. If he was 25, Adam looked like a 25-year-old. How did God do that? If he just made him, he made him look 25. Because that was the age he made him. Whatever the age was, Adam looked the part. So in other words, God built age into Adam. He didn't start off with the dust and then form a little baby, and then before his very eyes, and one day, the baby grew into a bigger baby and a child, and then God made Adam. He made Adam a full-grown man with built-in time.
That sounds logical, because
Okay.
if he made a baby, the baby couldn't bond for itself.
Yeah.
Could it?
Yeah. And the same with Eve. How old was Eve when God made her? Well, obviously it was helped meet for man. If it was someone to be his wife, he's not going to make Eve a baby. She's going to have time built into her. She may have long hair, 3 foot down her back. How do you do that? Because what?
There's not all babies born or you need nurtured in the beginning.
That's right. Yeah. Because some people, you know, we argue about what came first, the chicken or the egg. Now, evolutionists argue the egg came first because there are species out there that have eggs, start off with eggs, in what they would say is the earliest part of evolution. But when you think logically about chickens and eggs, if you had the eggs just by themselves, they're going to die, they're going to rot, because if nothing to look after them, nothing to sit on them and bring them to a chicken time, they'll just rot and die. So you've got to have a hen to look after eggs. And what can a hen do? It can lay more.
We're not all fertile either.
That's right. See, so, I mean, to me it's a fairly straightforward question. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Chicken came first. Because then chickens can have more eggs and create more chickens, because it can able to look after them. But the egg can't look after itself, and it can't reproduce. So to me it seems fairly straightforward. That's what I mean. Okay. So, while it's true there's no single passage or group of passages in the Bible that states exactly how the earth is, old the earth is, the Bible's genealogies extend from Jesus back to Adam imply that the earth is only thousands of years old, not millions or billions of years, as some would have us believe. Here's the age of the earth that we're going to look a little bit closer. Oops, all right. Okay, I thought there was something else going to go in there, maybe not. That showed you different strata. Anyway, there are many people who think the earth looks old. To them it looks very worn in places, like it's been around for a few billion years. But what does a young Earth actually look like? And does an old-looking Earth mean that God didn't create the Earth? The doctrine of apparent age suggests that the things God made during creation week were formed complete and fully functional. For instance, how old was Adam 5 seconds after God made him? He was 5 seconds old. But how old was he really? 20, 25? We don't know. Yet he walked, he communicated with God, he looked like an adult human being. In fact, we learn that God gave Adam and Eve plants that bore seeds and fruits from trees before he rested on the seventh day. So if a tree was cut down in the Garden of Eden on day 7, how many rings would the tree have? Because God would build the time in. Okay? Now, instant petrified wood. If you haven't been scared up to now, you're about to be petrified. Okay. The tree could possibly have hundreds of rings, yet it would only be 4 days old, since plants were made in day 3 creation. The real age of a tree and the parent of age of a tree would have been many years apart. Just because some things about the earth may appear old, or older than a few thousand years, doesn't mean that they are that old. According to scientists, polystrata fossils are fossils which are buried in geological short time span, either by one large depositional event or by several smaller ones. Geologists see no need to invoke a global flood to explain upright fossils. According to scientists who believe in evolution, coal formed millions of years ago. Supposedly, in swamps and bogs, plants began to die and fall to the bottom of the swamp. Over many years, these plants were buried by other dead plants and formed a substance known as peat. Eventually, the decomposing plants, due to heat, pressure and weight in them, turned from peat into coal. The plants that died and formed into coal are supposedly millions of years old. And evolutionists teach us that it took millions of years for coal to form. We know today that it doesn't take millions of years for coal to form. In fact, there's nowhere on Earth that coal is forming slowly in swamps or bogs. We have learned that coal didn't form millions of years ago, and now we know that coal can be formed in just a few years. Let's look at some evidence. So evolution says you've got the ancient swamp and plant debris, and you get the water and sediments, and then it becomes peat, more water, sediments, and then sediment to rock, and ultimately, over billions of years, it ends up as coal. Alright? It is true that coal is made out of dead plants. These plants, however, didn't fall into swamps and build up over millions of years. In fact, we know about coal. Many of these plants died and were buried very quickly. For example, when we look into coal, we often find tree trunks standing upright through many layers. If coal formed over millions of years, the tree trunks would have fallen and decomposed. They wouldn't have had the opportunity to fall upright and then be formed upright in an upright form. It's a different process altogether. What could have killed many plants all at once and then buried them quickly? Well, could have been Noah, the flood. Could be to explain as much of the way that coal was made on Earth. A polystrata fossil, or a fossilized tree that extended stratigraphically, that's a good word, upward through several layers of rock in Tennessee. Its roots were in a coal seam, and the overlying deposits included bedded shale and thin carbon-rich layers. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a fossilized tree. Okay, and the same one over there. Actually, it's fossilized, and its roots are in coal at the bottom. But it's a solid rock, but it's actually a tree. It's now a solid rock. It stuff goes through it, and then it just becomes that way.
It should be coal.
Yeah. In Arizona,
Underground.
in Arizona, there's a petrified forest,
Yep.
which I've seen,
Yep.
and we got a bit of wood from it too, and it's really very beautiful when it's polished up.
Yeah. This suggests a significant dynamic event that uprooted and transported and buried many trees in an upright position. Okay, normally you'd think the tree would fall down and get other layers of trees falling down, there are lots of places in the world where actually the trees are standing up, as if they've been floating and slowly the root system has been heavier and it's gone down the way and it's caught in something and stayed in that position, and then deposits of soil and stuff have come down and settled around them, and the whole thing is preserved standing up. Just such an event happened in our lifetime. In Mount St. Helena's in 1980, when an eruption toppled a standing forest, the tree trunks were deposited into a lake called Spirit Lake, and after a few years of waterlogging, the trunks sunk roots down in life's position, not in life's location. In other words, the roots were torn away from the original place and then driven down by the water into a different place, and once you got enough water in them, it kind of went down like that, so the roots stayed like that, so they look like they're standing up still as trees. And then slowly sediment is settling around the bottoms of them and building up, so they'll remain in that position. And eventually, if you left them for a little while longer, today there are tens of thousands of upright trees standing in the bottom of a lake. They're being engulfed by fine particles of volcanic ash and clay, and if the underlying organic layer of bark were heated by a future eruption, it would metamorphose into coal. So it doesn't need millions of years, it needs the right application of heat. And it will duplicate the scenario revealed in the photo. Okay? 1980. They've seen it in action. And actually a lot of the stuff about Mount St. Helena's has actually gone so much against evolution that they don't like talking about it. The other factor about St. Helens is that if St. Helens had happened even 500 years ago, they would then apply modern evolution to tell you the story. And they would say, here is a place, and here are the layers, billions of years old. But unfortunately they can't do it because they've got it on video. Actually videoed the whole thing happening. And so they can't get away with that. And you'll see the strata being formed under the video. And this billions of years of different rock layers and stuff like that, 1980. And they can't get away with it because it's all videoed. Well, they don't like it. The eruption of Mount St. Helens taught us much about the effects of dynamic processes, provided a model for deciphering unseen past geological cataclysms, and produced effects which before had puzzled us. Our understanding of possible events during the Great Flood in Noah's day was substantially expanded, including concluding that rapid deposition of sediments and burial of fossils could be expected during such a deluge. Because that's water and volcanic action of water that did that to the existing thing. The more evidence that science uncovers, the more it supports the biblical Earth history. The problem is they don't like it, so they don't talk about it. In order for coal to be formed, dead plants must be buried and plants must be put under pressure and heated. In science laboratories, scientists have proved that coal can form in only a few months. It's not necessary to have millions or even thousands of years to form coal. We can do it in the laboratory in months. You know? That's not good use for neither. Yeah. For instance, near Freiburg in Germany, an old wooden bridge was being replaced with a metal structure. The wooden pillars of the bridge had been in the ground only 100 years, yet when the bases were pulled out of the ground, they had already partially turned to coal. Under the right conditions, coal can form in a few months or years, not the thousands or the billions that they want us to do. Interesting, isn't it? They don't tell you all the story, do they? The flood of Noah's day would have buried thousands of tons of plants and animals very quickly. The heat and pressure of this burial could easily form the huge coal beds we see today. On the other hand, according to evolution scientists, fat fossils are fossils which are buried in a geologically short time span, either by one large deposit event or by several small ones. Geologists don't agree with us. They see no need to invoke a global flood to explain upright fossils. And that's true. Because if we face the reality of St. Helens and other evidence of these things happening over a short time span, they then see the same thing that creation see, but interpret the facts in an evolutionary consistent way. Just because it happens that way, we've seen it happen that way, we don't want to acknowledge that, so we'll say something else about it.
Yeah, I mean, if we just go within a certain amount of time, like years and all that, is that not truly an answer to
yeah. Well, the problem is that the process of developing the coal that way is an energy-hungry process. So by the time you actually make the coal and then use the coal, it's not really economically viable because you're using almost as much energy to create the coal as you would actually generate using the coal to generate power. And plus, it's a what they call a dirty energy source, because the byproducts of it give us smog and all that other type of stuff. So there's got to be a better way than just using coal. You know what I mean? Yet this goes against all the arguments they were presenting before the evidence got too great to withstand. Before St. Helens, they would say, oh no, this is millions of years. Now, since St. Helens, they've got video evidence before their very eyes. Interesting, isn't it?
So, can we suppose that the Grand Canyon was always the Grand Canyon?
No,
and doesn't their theories of how it became the Grand Canyon just seem like rubbish to me?
Well, in the last 30 years, they've had to change their theory on the Grand Canyon. Originally, they said, and if you went on a tour around the Grand Canyon, they would tell you it happened billions of years ago. Okay?
Yeah, the river wore its
way down, yeah. Well, they now know that's not true. Actually, no, that's not, yeah.
Oh.
It happened, the Grand Canyon was made probably within less than a year. And basically what happened was, above the Grand Canyon, because you see a river coming down, and then the Grand Canyon shoots off to the left, and then a trickle of the river comes back down, and the river continues its course. But in the meantime, what had happened was, up above the river, there were two huge lakes, and there was an earthquake, displaced billions of tons of water. And the billions of tons of water found its easiest passage, wiping out all the soft soils, if you like, and it carved the canyon out in less than a year. And then went back to its original river source.
Oh, I just thought God made the Grand Canyon.
No.
It is.
No. But it's interesting, isn't it? So even there's lots of things that they're actually, they've said for years over certain things, and now they're changing all the signs because they know that it didn't work that way. There's a lot of signs being left in place because, unfortunately, they don't want the evidence then to back up creation. So that's bad news. So they leave the old signs up and continue the myth, if you like. They will say to you, look what the sign says. This is how it happened. And then if you ask them, Pastor, is that how it happened? They say, well, really no. But I mean, we can't take a sign then because to do that will open up a can of worms. We don't want to do that.
Well, it's certainly impossible to believe that it was carved up by the river.
Well,
I've stood on the edge of it and I've looked right down. It's about a mile down below. You can't believe that the water actually cut that out. It's absolutely impossible.
Well, that's interesting fact because of St. Helens, they know that happened. Because if you carve a place like that out, the sides are a different shape.
Yeah.
The only thing it carves out a thing like that and leaves the sides fairly square is a bunch of water coming through the tank. And that's what carved it.
There must have been some kind of earthquake that diverted the course of the river, so the river began to run through the gap.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about these two massive, huge lakes.
Yeah, above.
Way above.
Yeah.
That's where the earthquake occurred.
Yeah.
And when it released all this water, the water carved the thing out. They said it's here.
If you see the depth of the canyon, it's hard to believe that.
I don't. But actually, they did something similar in St. Helens with water, and that's what helped them to realise. And then they looked at the evidence a bit more. But anyway, coal can be done under a few months in the right environment. We can produce it in the laboratory. Okay. Coal forms from plants are very, very quickly. The upright trees in the coal form prove this. In summary, coal forms from plants are very, very quickly. The upright trees prove it. Scientists are now able to form coal in laboratories in only a few months. So we know it need not take millions of years to form. Furthermore, things like embedded human footprints show that coal is not millions of years old. There are certain coal workings in the world where they've actually dug out human footprints in embedded coal. I don't think
Red River in Texas has human footprints and dinosaur footprints in the dry bed of the river.
the same red. It should be recognised that it is possible to determine with certainty any date prior to the beginning of historical records. That is impossible, okay? If we haven't got the historical records, then we're guessing. And then you can build up a picture, but there's still guesswork involved. But of course, with divine revelation, when the Bible claims, then we're talking about divine intervention and give us information. Science in the proper sense is based on observation, and we have no records of observation except historical records. Okay? So something to be scientific has to be scientifically proved, observed, and written about. Natural processes can be used to estimate prehistoric dates, but not to determine such dates. The accuracy of the estimates will depend upon the validity of the assumptions applied to the use of process of making such calculations. And I'll just... Okay? Most people assume that scientists by now have got it down to fine art, and that all agree on the age of the Earth. Okay? But, there's always a but. Unfortunately, it's not that quite simple. There are literally hundreds of methods used for dating, and most methods disagree with one another. So you take the same piece of rock, or the same piece of anything, and you apply the different dating methods to it, the majority will disagree.
Charles Darwin's son lopped 50,000 years off his father's estimate.
Yep. And they've been putting loads of years on since then.
That's right.
So here's an example of a few dating systems, okay? And here's the age of the Earth reference to the right-hand side. There's a test called the efflux of helium-4 in the atmosphere. The loss of helium-4 into the atmosphere, which makes the atmosphere about 1,750. It can be calculated from 1,750 to 175,000 years. As meteorite dust from space, it's too small to calculate. Radiocarbon to the Earth system, anything from radiocarbon, people think it's a magic thing. It can date anything. Actually, radiocarbon is really only good up to about 3,000 years. It can be dated they say 5 to 10,000 years. That's what they usually determine. But even at those, that's wildly a discrepancy. There was actually a Mexican sombrero. The guy died about 120 years ago in Mexico, and when he died, he was buried, and his sombrero was buried with him, and it fossilized and went into a rock, and they measured the rock, and according to the rock, he was 5,000 years old. You know, according to radio dating. So anyway, uranium, sodium, nickel to the ocean, magnesium, silicon, potassium, copper. These are all valid dating systems. But look at the right-hand side and the massive differences in ages that these different dating methods are giving you. Here's another 12 of them, 8 of them. Look at them again, the differences in methods. See, a lot of these are based on the flow of river. If so much metal is found in the sea, if they measure a river for a year, say, and there's so much, for example, potassium, flowing down that river this year, and they say, oh well, there's so much flowing down this year, a ton, and they look in the ocean and say, goodness, there's 50 tons in the ocean. Then how old's the ocean? Well, it must be 50 years. But if they'd done it the year before, there was only 100 weight went down. If they did it the year after, there was 300 weight went down. So they are assuming that their ton going down now has always been a ton going down. So whatever it is in the ocean, then they're getting an accurate measure. But that's not true. It varies all the time. So they can't tell you how much potassium there should be in the ocean. And that's what I say, most of these dating systems have got what they call an assumption. And that's why you end up with such a different thing. So these are all genuine dating. As a matter of fact, these are only a fraction I didn't want to bore you absolutely, pants off you. These are only a fraction of the dating systems that are out there that are used regularly by scientists. And if you look at the right-hand thing there, very few of them agree. An amazing thing of most of these is none of them talk about billions of years. Is that a surprise?
So, no, that, the one on the other page, development of human population. Is that what the estimated amount of people?
No. From most of the evidence we have from archaeology, most of the sites, and giving them a bit of leeway, the majority of what they call civilized sites pop into existence. And the average existence is talked about, from our dating now, about 7,000 years ago. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, where our language comes from, all these people, as a civilizations are popping up 4,000 BC, 5,000 BC. They're not here a million years ago. They're not here 100. In the latest one they're doing on blood, following the blood, the defects in blood throughout the world, the furthest they can push it back, including their assumptions, is 120,000 years. But even that is talking about man's beginning, and the civilizations, when they come down to talk about civilizations, they're usually talking at a push 12,000 years. So you hear them, different ones talk about 60 and 70,000 years. But most of them say, we're only talking about man. That's why they always say, man, as far as in the big picture of things, man is down here, compared with the billions of years that they claim. We're just a speck on the horizon of time, the time that they're talking about, okay? But that's the physical, and that's real science, if you like, that's the physical evidence. When you find a city being built and people living in a city, they've got a time scale built into them because of the coins they use or whatever they use for whatever, and you can date them fairly well. But when you go outside of that, and when you find these guys, individual guys living in caves, well, I can take you to Australia right now, and there's guys living in caves. They're not millions of years old, they're the same age as you and I, and they're still living in caves. You know what I mean? So, the judging by civilizations that dug up, they're only talking about 7,000 years ago. And some will push it back a little bit long further than that, with certain assumptions, okay? But in reality, the archaeological evidence is very, very young. That's the key element, But of course, because the archaeology doesn't fit in with their theory, they've got to kind of, ignore it, basically. There are a lot more dating systems, but these are enough to help you to see that when some scientists like Brian Cox says, we know how old things are. It depends on what dating system they're using, and does any other dating system agree with that conclusion. Brian Cox is good, if you listen to him carefully. It's interesting that they now say, because he's a physicist, they now say, because of using light, the light spectrum, as far as the telescopes can see, that every universe they find, and every, what's the other word for big universe, every galaxy they find, there's loads of them, they say that they've got it down to, according to light spectrum, they've got it down to about 92 components, 92 basic components. Because, for example, if in the light spectrum you go to somewhere like Mars, I believe it is, and it comes up in a red shift, because it's a lot of iron in it. And they look at another planet or another thing and they see a different colour pointing up, and that tells them it's made of different material. And they use that type of stuff. But I think it's very interesting. Out of billions and billions of galaxies that there are, they're actually admitting that there's only 92 elements involved in all of this, which is interesting. Because you'd think if it was under evolution, there'd be thousands of different elements, and they're all different, isn't it? All these different galaxies, no matter how different they are, have 92 core elements involved. I think that's amazing. I think that sounds like, go on. Anyway, it sounds like the DNA strand, with all the information it needs to produce a universe. Anyway.
Sounds like a few more cancer.
And well, I mean, yeah, they're doing the best. And every time they see something new, they, oh, this is it. This is what I feel. Ah. Oh no. Oh well, let me move on. Next.
I've seen dinosaur remains in the ground where they're still left,
Yep.
where they put a perspex cover to protect them.
Yeah.
They can't tell you that they're millions of years old. I've seen that in Canada.
Yep.
There's one area in Canada where you get a whole lot of dinosaur remains, and in some places they've just left them, and they've covered it with a huge perspex, almost like a greenhouse,
Yeah.
so you can have a look at them and see them.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Royal Edmondson Museum
Yeah.
out there too in Alberta, and every kind of dinosaur you can imagine, it's there.
Yeah.
And they're genuine.
Yeah.
They really
Oh, yeah.
existed,
Yeah, that's
but
right.
not the millions of years ago.
No. They would say for dinosaurs, they're a couple of billions of
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
They're 65 billion years.
Ah, that's
what
right,
it might take.
ridiculous. The bones are there,
Yeah.
on the surface.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop there. Most scientists suggest that it's billions of years old. If the dating methods these scientists use are right, then the Bible is wrong. However, if the dating methods that give billions of years are wrong, then the Bible remains the inspired word of God that we can trust. Okay. I think that's good enough to stop there.